My name is Milena, and my area of expertise is human behavior, and more specifically, understanding the hearts and minds of travelers. Now, my passion in using insights from human psychology and traveler behavior in the context of tourism was powered by the idea that tourism is really a people to people and people to places industry. So, in that sense, understanding how people think about, react to, and engage in behavior when it comes to their holidays is really at the core of what can make the industry more successful and also can support our efforts to make it more sustainable. Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting. We've been waiting to start sharing with you and the wonderful project that you're all engaged in. What I will do today is sort of lay the grounds with sharing some foundational insights about how behavior change at all matters in the context of sustainability and some of the efforts that you're doing and where it can really add value. So you're already familiar with the fact that there is a whole series that we'll go through. Today, we are just talking about behaviors, what is behavior smart thinking, and how behavior change is actually related to tourism and sustainability. We'll then focus more on how that matters for the work that destination authorities do and separately travel businesses. So our journey today will hit several thematic milestones. The first one is just to introduce what is behavior smart, why does it matter, where did it all start, and what is behavior change. Then we'll focus on the context of our industry, and we'll talk about the link between behavior smart and travel, and also sustainability. So starting off with behavior smart thinking and what is it, and really why should we care about it? So the main idea of behavior smart thinking is that we need to be realistic about how people really think, make decisions, and act in order to in different situations. And the purpose is to be able to design sustainability solutions that work better and cost less. And the reason that they work better and cost less is that by being realistic about how human psychology and the human mind works in a particular context, we minimize the conflict, the friction between human behavior and the goals that we set for ourselves. So, behavior smart thinking has its origin from behavioral sciences, so which have leaped in the last 2 or 3 decades quite a bit. I'm not going to go into theory much, but just want to explain where the big contribution of behavioral scientists has been in the past years. So going back 2 or more decades, many of the fundamental systems and ways of thinking about societies and economies were grounded on the assumption that we as human beings are 100% rational. That means that every time we face a situation where we need to make a decision, we are quite efficient in finding all the relevant information that allows us to compare the pros and cons. We analyze all that data, and we actually are able to forecast or predict how future changes will impact the choice situation that we are engaged in. And we account for uncertainties that may come along the way, especially when we're dealing with choices that have an extended outcome in the future. Behavioral scientists actually, with the new knowledge about how our brains work, how our emotions influence decision making, and so on, have put more realism into these assumptions. And today we know that even for serious decision making, we actually deviate from these assumed models of rationality. And in many situations, when even, as I said, when we're making important decisions, we actually try to cut short that tedious and longer process of looking at pros and cons and comparing different options, and we seek decision shortcuts. We often ignore information, even if it's right in front of our eyes. And in many situations, we are actually influenced by the moment, by the immediate context in which we are. We also know now that we are not great at imagining the future and actually are often unable to predict how our own taste will change over time, what will matter to us in the future rather than today, and so on. And part of that package of human realism insight is also the understanding that we generally have a hard time acting when we are faced with vague and complex ideas. So you can see here how all of this is becoming relevant to sustainability. So I want to give you a couple of examples to illustrate how all of that actually plays out in reality. So imagine that you're planning a camping trip this upcoming weekend, and you need a new coffee pot for that. You go in the store, you like the one that you see for $35, you go to pay for it at the cashier's desk, and the person behind the desk tells you that if you're willing to walk 10 minutes, 3 blocks down the street, there's another outdoors gear store, and it actually carries the same coffee pot for $10 less. And if you're like the majority of buyers in this situation, you will invest 10 minutes of your time and save $10 by walking 3 blocks down. Now, if the following week you are on the market for a backpack, again, preparing for an outdoors experience for the weekend, you go and like the one that you see on the screen, you take it to the cashier's desk, and the person behind the desk tells you that if you're willing to walk 10 minutes, 3 blocks down the street, there's another outdoors store, and it actually carries that same backpack for 640 rather than $650. And if you're like the majority of buyers in this situation, you will forego that opportunity, just pay the higher price and go home with your backpack. So what is interesting about this is that you see that in two different situations, we are treating one and the same amount, $10, very differently. And in the first situation, we're willing to act in order to save $10. In the same, we're not. So this is an illustration of how some of our contemporary understanding about decision making has evolved and now pays attention to these deviations from rationality. Let me give you a second example. Imagine that you're at a conference, and in the coffee break, of course, there's coffee outside. There are 3 cup sizes that you can choose from, and the majority of event goers will go with the middle option, which feels not too small, neither too large. The next day, the vendors providing the cups and the coffee are changing the sizes. And so what used to be the largest is now the middle one. And what used to be the middle is now the smallest one. And again, the middle option will actually get chosen by the majority of event goers. And what's interesting about this is that, again, it's an illustration that in certain contexts, we end up making choices that are not driven by rationality or actually deviate from what's the rational choice. In this situation, the rational pattern would be to make a decision about the amount of coffee that you would have based on what is good for your body, how much coffee you've already had, and so on and so forth. But instead, the choice is actually driven by the specific design of the choice set and the options that you have presented in front of you. So, what is the explanation here? Now I will share with you two of the biggest findings that come out of the progress that behavioral sciences have made in the past decades that actually matter and help explain why we see such deviations from rational choice. The first one is that we now know that while individual characteristics, value system, previous experience, of course, are very powerful factors when it comes to shaping decision-making and behavior, actually context can sometimes be even more powerful. So one and the same person with the same value system, with the same experience, can end up making very different decisions depending on the immediate context in which they are, depending on the design of the choice set which they're faced with, depending on who else is around them, what these other people around them are choosing. So context is extremely powerful when it comes to shaping decision making. And this is one of the biggest game-changing understandings that we now have about choices and decision making. The second one is that we actually channel our choices through a dual decision-making system. We have a slow thinking brain, which follows this more classical rational decision-making pattern of analyzing, comparing options, and really mindfully trying to arrive at the option that seems to have most benefits for us. But we also have a fast brain, and that fast brain is very eager to employ all sorts of shortcuts in order to save time and energy and avoid this lengthy pros and cons analytical process. This is the system that is very much influenced by the context, by the choices of others, the expectations of others, the past experiences, is everything that can serve as a shortcut to arriving at the decision. These two things are important in understanding why we saw some of the mistakes, such as treating one and the same amount of money differently into different situations, or choosing to have different amounts of coffee depending on the choice set that we see. But they're also applicable to understanding some important social designs that really can influence life-changing decisions that we make and that our societies incorporate. I'm going to give you an example. One of the studies that really put the importance of behavioral sciences on the map of economists and policymakers was conducted in 2003, and it focused on looking at organ donation programs across different countries in Europe. And one of the interesting findings of this analysis was that countries were somehow distributed in two extremes. You had countries which had almost perfect 99 or 100% enrollment of citizens in national organ donation programs, and you had countries which had just a few percentages, anything from 4 to 8 to 10, 12%. So the researchers took a very long time to actually go through the different factors that may explain this. I've pulled here 2 data points from this study for Austria, which enjoyed an almost perfect 100% rate, and Germany, which was actually one of the higher ones on among the lowest, the low group, which barely achieved 12%. And I specifically use these 2 countries because they are considered to be culturally very close. They're geographically close and so on. So really, there's no immediate or intuitive explanation of why this is so. Now, what actually ended up being the explanation or the factor that explained this huge difference is, believe it or not, the design of the enrollment form. So in the countries like Austria, which enjoyed almost perfect enrollment rates, the default option of the enrollment form was that you are enrolled in the national organ donation form, but you have the option to mark or indicate if you do not want to be part of it. So this gives the freedom to people who have cultural or religious or other reasons who prevent them from agreeing to actually take action and correct their choice. Now, in the countries such as Germany and other countries who were in the lower group, the defaults were actually switched. So by default, you are not enrolled in the National Organ Donation Program, and you actually have to take action and check the box if you want to be part of it. So something as simple as that actually explains such a big difference in enrollment or commitment to a program, which all people across all countries agree is something that is important, that adds benefit to societies, and that can benefit individuals if they end up being in a situation where they're needing transplantation. So you can see how the same mistakes that we looked at the beginning, or factors in the immediate context that we looked as fun examples, can actually translate to decisions which can have fundamental and significant impact on the quality of living, on societal design, and really our ability to save lives. So with this introduction, I want to gently transition to the context of travel and sustainability, our efforts to be more sustainable, and explain how this new understanding of decision-making and these mechanisms that explain what we refer to or what may seem as decision mistakes actually apply in the context of travel and sustainability. One thing that I want to start with is to talk a little bit about the fact that sustainability is actually difficult from a human perspective, based on what we now know about human behavior and the way the human brain works. Remember, I mentioned at the beginning that one of the big contributions of behavioral scientists is a more realistic understanding of how we make choices and what are some of the barriers in decision making. And I mentioned that choices that require predicting the future, forecasting even our own taste or what will matter to us in the future, and choices that require dealing with vague and complex concepts are actually exceptionally difficult. So sustainability, climate change, these are topics that are actually difficult for people to process. They're difficult for them to wrap their mind around, and especially if professionally they're very far from the fields that that provide the scientific and even operational explanation and insights into them, they're really overwhelming. Now, in the context of travel, this is even more so and more true, because in addition to these being difficult and complex concepts, when we think about travelers, this is also something that is in conflict with the main motivation of traveler behavior. Think about it. Travelers by nature focus on the now and the joy of being on the road and enjoying a holiday. So naturally, sustainability is at best a nice to have add-on benefit that they would pay attention to only if it somehow aligns with the behavior that secures to them maximum fun and enjoyment and memories from their trip. The same thing applies to workers, who are the other group that really is engaged in the operational execution of sustainability, because they're the ones who are on the ground and who make decisions and engage in behaviors that have direct impact on the footprint that the tourism industry generates. And for them, naturally, the focus is on performance and success. So sustainability, again, is often perceived and comes as an extra responsibility rather than as something that is part of the main focus. So you can see that in addition to this being psychologically complex and difficult, the nature of the main motivation that drives behavior for workers and travelers is such that it pushes the importance of sustainability even further. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper into that and look at what science tells us specifically about travelers, and why when we employ human realism, we see that relying on travelers to be proactive about sustainability seems to be less and less possible. So here is what we know about traveler behavior and sustainability attitudes from literature. The first one is what we already highlighted, and that's that experience is the engine of traveler decision-making and traveler behavior. If we are dealing with travelers who are more inclined to be making responsible choices and are mindful about sustainability, at best, it will be a nice to have add-on. The second thing to know is that just like we illustrated with some of these fun examples at the beginning, ease and context design are often more important in driving choice rather than mindful process of decision making. So people engage in shortcut driven, in fast thinking choices, which are actually highly determined by the context and what is easy. Another thing to understand is that when people are on holiday, they actually release controls and discipline. So the same way that they would deviate from their everyday diet or everyday exercising schedule simply because they are enjoying a holiday, they deviate from their recycling or other responsible behaviors, which are part of their everyday life. So even if at home they tend to adhere to buying practices and consumption practices which align with sustainability principles, when they travel, they deviate from these. Another thing that we know is that even though more and more members of society and a growing number of travelers declare that they are aware of the sustainability crisis and the importance of transitioning towards more responsible travel behaviors, they still acknowledge that sustainability, that thinking about sustainability is overwhelming during holiday. And so they really see that as something that comes in direct clash with the state of being in leisure and relaxation. So even if at home they might be inclined to think about and consider behaviors that pursue sustainability objectives, when they're on holiday, they actually prefer not to think about them. And another thing is that one of the most powerful mechanisms that controls or guides our behavior is actually made irrelevant in the context of travel. This is the idea that we generally account for the expected outcomes or impacts from certain actions that we take. And that is one of the powerful control factors that determines whether we will engage in an action or we will resist that. When we travel, we have a very active disconnect between where the impact is happening and where we are, because we are at the destination for a short period of time, and the impacts of our irresponsible and unsustainable behaviors will remain in the place while we actually leave and are not there to see it. So this mechanism further makes it very difficult to rely on travelers to be proactive and to actually be the engine that moves us to more sustainable practices. There's more. One thing that we have to acknowledge is that thanks to the advance of um, digital technologies and the way that consumers buy and research options and buy options in today's realities has also altered the pattern of decision making or the buying patterns for travelers. Why does that matter? It matters because in the past, when we had this more sit down and compare options type of scenario, where before we depart, we would look at different services and different experiences and actually do much of the planning before we leave in that anticipation stage. More of the purchase decisions were happening then. So this is a time when we compare options, when we look at the different factors which help us determine what is the best option. So it's more of a slow decision-making type of pattern. However, today, with the advance of digital technologies and the fact that we always have a phone or another digital device, which allows us to make the purchasing decision much later into the experience after we have already departed, changes the way that we make many of these decisions. Because think about it. If you're already on the road, or if you have already arrived at the destination and you just now are finalizing your plans about experiences or hiring a local guide or restaurants you're going to visit, you're making decisions already immersed in the dynamics of the destination, enjoying the sights and sounds and smells of the place you're visiting. And in that environment, you are making a decision that is much more likely to follow a fast thinking system one pattern. So the reality is that the fact that what we know about traveler behavior and the traveler mindset, combined with what we now understand is the new pattern of decision making and the growing importance of our fast thinking brain, means that we have a very different situation in terms of buyer behavior and in terms of patterns that guide decision making. This also allows us to understand why is it that we see travelers making more likely to engage in unsustainable choices rather than responsible alternatives. And the reality is that that's the case because in many situations, making the unsustainable choice is actually the easier and often the automatic choice. And the second big reason is that very often, actually, unsustainable choices are sustainable choices are in conflict with the main reason why travelers are traveling, which means the excitement, the experience. So understanding that leads us to the question of what can then drive the change in the behavior of travelers that we are all eager to see, so that we can make this desired transition towards sustainable practices while also continuing to be successful and profitable as destinations and individual businesses. So what we know about human behavior and what we just described as the new understanding that we have about patterns and ingredients of traveler decision making shows that the classical approach that we have been having assumes that when we give travelers information, we educate them about what is right and what is wrong, this would lead them to making more sustainable choices, and as a result, would actually reduce the negative impacts of the travel economy. Now, what we now know about how actually the traveler mindset treats sustainability suggests that the behavior smart approach is slightly different. And it calls for making sustainability easy, or set it even as a default option, incorporate it in the design, which will automate almost all choices into their sustainable format. And that, as a result, would actually help us reduce the negative impacts of the tourism industry. Another way of looking at that is to understand that based on what we know about human behavior, demand-driven sustainability, in other words, travelers demanding sustainability and then changing supply in order to respond that, is simply unrealistic. It's not going to happen. So in that sense, a realistic transition to more sustainable tourism economy comes through supply-driven sustainability, meaning that it lies on the shoulders of destinations and businesses to make sustainability easy or weaved into the design of the offering. And this, as a result, will actually transform the demand and get us to a point where sustainable choices dominate the tourism economy. So how does that actually work? Let's dive even deeper into traveler decision making and how understanding the exact ways in which people make different choices during their holidays can lead us to sometimes actually very easy ways of setting up the design in a way that makes sustainability easy and more likely. We need to understand that when travelers make decisions about a weekend or a day of leisure or their annual holiday, they engage in two types of choices. The first group relates to operational ease. So things such as what airline we will fly, what time we will arrive, how are we going to move from the airport to the hotel, what hotel to choose, location-wise, price-wise, and so on. So all of these are logistical, practical, functional choices, the purpose of which is to eliminate hassle and to minimize the likelihood for any problems or logistical complications. Now, the other group of decisions actually relate to the experience. These are the choices that travelers make with the desire, the motivation to have a phenomenal experience, to maximize the time that they have at your destination, to maximize the memory creation power of this holiday, to maximize the opportunities to taste and learn about and really feel the spirit of the destination that they're experiencing. So, why does it matter that we understand that these decisions are actually different by nature? It matters because based on what we just discussed earlier and what we know about the nature of this decision, there are different ways in which we can facilitate a more sustainable choice, depending on what is the nature or which category the specific decision is linked to. So when we are dealing with operational decisions, what can increase the likelihood that a responsible choice will be selected by the traveler is putting the desired option as a default option. Remember the reference to organ donation, how powerful defaults can be. Making the sustainable choice effortless, very easy to go for. Remember that that is what is really important for System 1. And making it part of the design. Let me give you an example. So setting up the desired option as a default would mean, for example, if you want to get people visiting your city to actually walk more by foot from one attraction to another, rather than jump in taxis, to slow them down a little bit, make sure they engage more with your destination, with local businesses, and also to lower the environmental carbon footprint of their stay. You will make walking directions the default option everywhere where you can. So whether it's a restaurant that they're trying to reach, the first option that they would see by default would be walking. So this is an example of how we can increase the likelihood that they will walk. The second option or the second tactic is to make it effortless. So if we are trying to get people to walk and take the public transportation or benefit from our public transportation more instead of driving or using taxis, then we need to make it very easy for them to see how they can walk from point A to point B, how they can, and where they can buy a ticket. So if you're giving them an itinerary, directly there, you link the walking route. So it's really effortless for them to figure out how by foot they can get to where they need to be. And similarly, you link there the page where they can go and buy a ticket or find their the easiest public transportation route to the next point where they need to be. So making it very easy and effortless for them by presenting it right in front of their eyes and making it just a click away is extremely powerful. And then weaving it in the design. So for example, if we are presenting our guests with an itinerary and their afternoon activity is a discovery tour of an old church and the space around it, and then the next item is a dinner at a traditional restaurant. If we want them to move from one location to another by taking the public transport, taking a tram, we basically present the tram trip as an activity on the itinerary and frame it as the city from the tram window. We give them, of course, the exact route and exact instructions, and we invite them to enjoy interesting sights along the way so that they perceive that this is part of the overall itinerary. So this is an example of how you can gently incorporate the desired experience or the desired choice in the itinerary and more or less eliminate the need for the guest to be making that choice. Now, let's look at how all of this is different when we are concerned with choices that travelers make in order to have a phenomenal experience where their thinking is slightly different. When we're dealing with experience-related choices, we need to be striving to make sustainable options irresistible, exciting, rewarding. Here is how. So imagine that we are trying to get people to buy low footprint experiences. For example, swimming in lakes, jumping in lakes, spending time by the water, kayaking, and so on. So we want to present it not as something that is good for our nature or for our destination, because we know this is not going to drive that decision, but we want to present it as something that is simply irresistible. You just can't imagine not doing that because it seems to be something super, super cool. So the example that you see actually is from work that from an actual application of this principle in Finland as part of one of our projects, where we were trying to present low carbon experiences as super appealing, so that more and more guests, actually travelers, plan to engage in them during their stay in Finland. And this is the illustration of how we are doing that. Now, another thing that we can do to influence choices and steer guests towards the more responsible choice is to make it exciting. And the way to do that is, for example, to add limited availability. This is perfect for getting people to choose local food, especially seasonal food. So when people visit, one of the ways to maximize their economic impact and channel more of their spend to local suppliers and local farmers and local producers is to get them to spend more on local food, local drinks, local crafts, and so on. When it comes to food, one of the best ways to increase the excitement is to tell them that now they can try something that's seasonal, and it's only available a limited amount of time. The fact that you can go for something that is available within a limited amount of time, it activates emotion and actually adds to the excitement and significantly increases the likelihood that you will be attracted to that option. So it's a powerful mechanism and in line with the experiential mind of travelers. And the third mechanism here is to make the sustainable option rewarding. So imagine that we want to get guests or the visitors of a city to stay away from the hotspots in the city and actually to go and visit and enjoy some less visited parts of the destination. We would do that by presenting these places as places that offer rewards. So if you go on that half a day tour on the back alleys of our city, you will actually see the authentic heartbeat and you will see many attractions that most people miss. But most importantly, you will be rewarded with the opportunity to see the oldest functioning church that actually locals perceive as the real cultural treasure of the town. So presenting a reward element in the option that we want to encourage is also another powerful way of encouraging more responsible behavior. So these are some of the insights that I hope triggered your curiosity about how human psychology and insights about traveler mindset actually matter in our efforts to make travel more sustainable. I want to take just a moment to synthesize or summarize the key insights that I hope I was able to convey today. So we started off by talking about the fact that the leap forward in behavioral sciences has really accelerated the application of knowledge about human behavior to understanding and solving problems across a wide variety of socioeconomic contexts. We saw some interesting examples. Advancing the sustainability agenda has been slow due to the incorrect assumptions that we have been making about people and specifically travelers in the context of our industry and the way that they think about responsible choices. We now know that the main driver of traveler behavior and the choices that travelers engage in is the desire to have an outstanding and hassle-free experience. So with that, and that is supplemented with the fact that the changing socioeconomic dynamics actually influence the patterns that guide traveler buying decisions. And we see more and more of the traveler buying decisions being channeled through the fast thinking decision-making system. And we also illustrated how we need to change the context in order to make it easy and enjoyable for travelers to go for sustainable choices. So this is where I finish. If I have managed to activate your curiosity for more insights about human behavior, this is a link to our Knowledge Corner where we have a lot of free resources and interesting articles that can satisfy your curiosity. And other than that, I am happy to address questions and engage in a discussion.